Hey everybody, Mark Price here, devslopes.com, and we are going to do something very awesome today, and that is building a form in React. And the reason why it's so awesome, I'm pulling up the skeleton project here. The reason why it's awesome is because it is highly reusable. I remember when I was building an Angular directive for form input that did like email validation and things like that, it took me to make it perfect, like 10 hours. It was just ridiculous, all the things you had to do. And with React, I can do it so much more quickly and more modularized, and it's easier to distribute. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm excited. So React skeleton, download zip. It's going to take a minute. Come on, there we go. React skeleton, unzipping it, and that is downloaded. While we're on Google Chrome, let's go to getbootstrap.com because we're going to use Bootstrap in this application because I cannot handle looking at ugly CSS and HTML. Just can't handle it. Download Bootstrap. And I'm just going to download the zip file. Download Bootstrap. I'll grab that, put it here on the desktop, and I'm going to unzip this as well too. Delete that. And delete this. I'm going to rename my React skeleton master to forms in React. Okay. I'm going to open this up and go into the public folder and right click and do new folder. We're going to call this CSS. I'm going to go into Bootstrap, into the CSS folder here. And we are looking for bootstrap.min.css and bootstrap-theme.min.css. And I'm going to just drag these over here into the CSS folder. Normally, I would also grab the jQuery file for our Bootstrap, but since I'm not going to be using any of the functions that it requires, I'm not going to put it in. You can do it if you want. So, here we go. Okay, let's terminal, open terminal, command space terminal. Okay, and I'm going to CD into my desktop and CD into forms in React. Okay, ls to make sure everything's here, which it is. Okay, let's go ahead and open this up in Atom. So Atom space dot. Okay. So we got some source, some public, it's all there. CSS in there looking good, looking good. These list files that come with the skeleton project, let's get rid of them. I just right click in them and going to move to trash. Okay. And then, so what we're going to do is we're going to build a form, okay? A lead capture form. It's going to have a name and an email address and a submit button. It's going to all be done in Bootstrap. We're going to code everything. We're also going to write an email validator, which is really cool. So basically, as you're typing, it's going to make sure you have a valid email. And it sounds simple, but it'll require some code here. And that's what we're going to do. So let's think about this for a second here. So sometimes you can draw things out. Sometimes I just do it in my head. Right now, I'm just doing it in my head. So I think I'm just going to have like a Bootstrap panel. And inside the panel, there's going to be one input field. And then underneath it, the email input field, and underneath that, the button. Nothing crazy, right? Just a simple design. So I'm thinking there's going to be a form component, and then a name field component, and an email field component. So 3 different components total. I could also put the submit button in a component, but I don't really feel like it's necessary at this time because it's not doing anything except being clicked. So, and the Bootstrap default styling is fine. So I'm going to go over to my main.jsx. Let's get rid of list. And I'm going to leave this right here just so we know that we need to put something there. And let's go ahead and create some files. So get out of public, and in components, I'm going to right click and go to new file. And let's call this lead capture. And by the way, what I think is really cool about React, and what you could possibly do as well too, is you could create a container component that's very specific. So a lead capture form, or maybe it's not a lead capture form, maybe it's just some other type of form for entering data, like when you're signing up for something or filling out information, you're registering for some product or whatever, you can call it different forms. You got maybe a lead capture form or a data form or an address form. And so you can make the very specific changes for your container form and then just reuse the components for email field and name field and just bring those in. You never have to write that code again. So I envision that your container codes will change between apps. Maybe not. You could always reuse lead capture, okay? But they could change between apps, and then the components inside are less changeable. So, which is very powerful. Less code to write. So lead capture.jsx. So let's go ahead and make this bigger here so you can see it. Okay, var react equals require react. Okay, look at those colors. They're so pretty. You guys in your vampire themes and dark backgrounds. I know who you are. It's pretty much every single person except for me. So var react equals require react, and then var lead capture is going to be the name of our component equals react.create class. Okay. And let's go ahead and render. All right. And what else can we do here? Let's put the exports in here. By the way, if you're wondering, should I start at the smallest component level, or should I work my way up or backwards? How should I go? Top level down? So what I typically like to do, it's kind of a hybrid. There's no one way. Okay, there's no one way. But I like to kind of framework the basics out of the top lead capture form, or the top container component, I mean, and just kind of framework it out, see what I like about it, and then work my way down to the lower level. Sometimes when you're at the smallest level, it's a little bit harder to think because you got to think backwards and all the way up. And you can do it both ways. I have no one way. I just do it kind of how my brain processes it, and this is how it works for me. So we're going to return some JSX HTML stuff here. And so what are we going to have? We're going to have a div, of course, and it's going to be, we're using Bootstrap, so I'm going to say class name equals call-sm-3. I think a 3-column Bootstrap, or excuse me, a 3-column form is probably a good size for a form. Okay, and so there's our column there. Okay, and inside the column, I want a panel, so div class name equals panel. We'll just say panel-default. That's Bootstrap. This is all Bootstrap, by the way. These class names are pure Bootstrap. Okay. And if you don't know about the Bootstrap classes, again, just go to getbootstrap.com and look at the components tab, and it'll tell you all about it. Really easy. You can copy and paste. That's how easy it is. And that's what I do when I forget stuff. So panel default. And then so inside the panel, we want a panel body, because when you put the body in the panel, it gives some nice spacing and stuff. And I just know this from experience. You could try it without it if you just see what I'm talking about. So you don't have to manually add padding and stuff. So div class name equals panel-body. I believe that's what it is. And the div. So what I'm going to do is in here is where we're going to put our actual elements here. So, and that's where we'll have the email field, the name field, and the button. So that sounds good to me. So I think that's good for now. Let me put a semicolon here for some nice cleanup. Let's go ahead and now create our other components. And I'm going to right click, go to new file, my components folder, and let's start with the harder one, the email field, because we're going to do validation on this. So email field.jsx var react equals require react. Okay. And var email field equals require, not what? What am I smoking something here? React.create class. That's what I'm looking for. Cow. What time is it? It's only 9 p.m. It's not even a 2 a.m. session here. Okay, so there's our email field. Let's return some JSX. Okay, so one more thing before I forget. You guys are sick of me forgetting this, so module.exports better do this now. Email field. Okay, by the way, it's kind of buried here in the millions of videos you're watching here, but we don't always have to make it into a variable. You know, I could have done this. I could have said module.exports and equals react.create class, and I could have done it all right there. Same exact thing. I just like to put things in variables. I don't know why. Just the way it is. So, okay, let's think about this component. Okay. So And by the way, everything we're doing here, this is exactly how I did it when I created this. I actually, what I typically do when I'm teaching these videos is I build out the code for all of these things on the spot. So it's nice and fresh, not even from a script. I actually solve the problems like a real programmer would and say, how would I do this as a professional programmer? And then I come back and I redo it with you. You're not here, so I'm doing it again for myself, but it's for you. And so you can actually see how my brain works in solving these things. So this is good stuff. So how do we want to solve this problem? So we want an input field. So I know I'm going to need an input. And what I'm thinking is, this is what I'm thinking. When the user is typing, every keystroke, it validates the email address to make sure it's a valid email address, which is cool. We want to make sure it's not junk going into our database. And so every time you make a keystroke, it's going to validate it. And then I want to change the styling, whether it's valid or not, on this email field, the border around it. And it sounds simple enough, but we're going to have to write some code for it. So first things first, let's go ahead and get our input in here. So what do we want to do here? Div class equals, class name equals form group. Okay. And there we go. Let's end that there. So form group is a Bootstrap class. You put controls for a certain form item inside of a form group. So like, let's say you had a label and an input field, you could actually make both of them red if they have problems or things like that. So I'm setting a form group here as the class name, and then let's just put the input in here. This is a standard HTML input, and this input is going to be form control. This is the Bootstrap class that makes it look nice and pretty, which is nice. I like it. Okay, remember how I said every time we make a keystroke, we want to do something. So obviously we're going to need to call the onChange listener. And we're going to say this.onChange, which I haven't created yet. So let's do that here. Let's go ahead and, where do I want to put it? Right here. Wow, I am just stinking this up here. I didn't even put a render function. You guys are like, what? You guys are like, put it in. And I'm like, I can't hear you. Okay, so render. There we go. Woo. Okay. Okay, so return, there we go. That's looking much better. So what I want now is to do my onChange function, and it's going to take the event, of course, that we get called back from the actual event. And so onChange, that looks good to me. What else do we want to do here? Oh, we want to set the placeholder. Placeholder equals email. Okay, I'm going to make this a little bit smaller here just for a second. When it's so large like this, it's hard to fit everything on the same screen here. Okay, so that looks good to me. That's the placeholder. What else do we want to put in here? We got a regular form. That looks good. And, oh, I don't think we need this. This is HTML, right? Some elements have to have the slash. Some elements have to have the closing tag. Some don't have anything at all. All right, so when we're changing, okay, we want to know if it's valid or not, right? So somewhere over here, when we're changing it, we need to determine if the email address is valid. Well, I don't want to write a bunch of code to validate emails. This is not a class about coding. Well, it is, but it's not a class about algorithms, and I don't want to do the work. I'm sure someone's already done the work for me. So let's go find something that'll work for us here. We're going to type in npm email validation. And here's a package. And you kind of know if a package is good or reliable based on how many downloads it has. 422 downloads in the last day. I'd say that's pretty reliable. 2,500 downloads in the last week. You know, whatever. If you're really concerned, you can go, look at any open issues or problems or whatever, or even look at the code itself. So it even says how to use it here, how to install it. So let's go ahead and do that now. Let's go ahead and get this up and running. npm install email validator. Okay, so open up terminal, and we are going to make sure my node is running. npm use 4.2.2. I'm going to say npm install email validator -- save. Okay, and let's look at the documentation again. You just require it, email -validator, and then you call validator validator.validate. Okay, proper dictation. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that now. Var validator. Validator equals require email validator. The word. I don't want to say that anymore. Okay. So every time it changes, we want to make sure it's valid or not. Okay. Because what's going to happen is it's going to turn red. Also, at some point in time when the form is submitted, someone clicks the button, we also want to know if this field is valid or not. So I'm thinking that we need to store some state for if it's valid. And of course, if you've worked with forms here, we need to also put the, it is requiring a slash here. You don't typically have to in HTML all the time. Anyway, I think we're going to need some state to manage if it's valid or not, as well as the value of the field. Okay, so let's go ahead and set that up now too. See how we're kind of jumping around? There's no one way to do it. You kind of go as far as you can in programming, and then when you hit a brick wall, you think, okay, how do I solve this next problem? And you're like, oh, then you solve it, and then you go back and you connect it together. And so that's what we're doing here. So get initial state, that is going to be called automatically by React when it needs to get the initial state, right, at initialization time of this component. It'll only be called once, okay? And so we want to return. You always return an object here. And so we're going to say valid is going to be true. By default, it's going to be true. Even though there's no characters in it, we're going to make it default. 'Cause who wants a form that looks red right from the beginning when the page loads? They're like, I just loaded the page and I'm doing something wrong. So valid is true. And then value is going to be the value of the input field here. And by default, it's going to be empty. Okay? That looks good to me. So now what we can do is over here, we can say value equals this.state.value. So every time we make a keystroke, okay, we're going to go over here and we're going to update the value with the new state, and in return it's going to update over here. Don't ever, ever, ever in React hard code in the value like right here or whatever, because it's stuck there. It won't do anything. This is how you do it with forms or with interaction, and anytime you're setting the value on one of these forms or any type of HTML component that has a value property, you need to set it dynamically like we're doing here. So this is no magical trickery. This is how you do it. Value equals this.state.value, which will be coming right out of here. So on change, this is what we're going to do. We're going to first, well, we can set the value. Let's just go ahead and grab the value first. So I'm going to say var val equals this.state.value, because it would have already been not this.state.value, e.target.value. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab the value that is coming from this right here. Okay, so this is important to understand. You listening? Okay. So this on change, every time you type, okay, the underlying value that React's kind of overriding with your HTML element, okay, it's still there. So this value here is the value of the form, but it's not the same as the one here exactly. So this is the underlying actual HTML element. It's grabbing the value out of the box that's being entered in, okay? So that's what's happening when this on change is called. We're actually grabbing it from the element itself, okay? And this value right here, okay, this will be set based on the state, okay? I know it's a little convoluted, but do it enough times and it'll start to make sense. Okay, so let's var val equals e.target.value. Grab it from the input. Okay, now what we can do is we can check if it's valid. So we'll say, I like this space. So if e.target.value, okay, and this is on change. So if e.target.value dot, actually, let's put it here. If validator, let's call our validator function, and then pass an e.target.value. So if it's true or if it's valid, now, do we want to do that? That's the question. I'm thinking about it here for a second. Do we want to do this at all? So if it's true, okay. Well, maybe if it's false, it's better. Let's check if it's false. So if it's false, we'll say this.setState, okay? And we're going to set the state. Remember, you don't ever set state. You don't ever say this.state and then change it there. You have to set the state with the function. We're going to say valid equals false. So this validator is going to take the value of whatever's inside of the field here whenever it's changing, and it's going to set it to false here if it's not valid, not a valid email. Okay. And then secondly, we're going to set update the value, e.target.value. Okay. Remember the value that's down here at the bottom right. Okay. We have to assign that, but it's also where it's coming from. So it's important that we grab it from the element here and assign it into the state. So e.target.value. Okay. Else this dot set state, and we're going to say valid is true and value is going to be the same. We're still going to update the value in either case. Okay. That looks good to me. Okay. Yeah, I could deal with that. So there's our email field. And what else do we need on here? Get initial state. I think it looks pretty good here. We've exported it. Okay, so on change, let's just change the value on it. Oh, the class name. We need to set the red if it's not correct. So let's do that now. We can do that right here actually. So we can do say var form class. We're going to set a class for the styling, if it's valid or not. So what we're going to do is say this dot state dot valid. So we're going to do a ternary operation. We're going to say basically if the state is valid, let's use form group. So this is the default class, which makes it look nice. If it's not valid, okay, that's what the colon there means. It means if it's not, otherwise, form group has error. Okay, so we're gonna throw the has error. These are Bootstrap classes. This will make our form look nice and red, which is exactly what we want. And then all we need to do here is make this a dynamic class name. So I can go ahead and say form class. Okay, so that's looking good, I think. So unchange, get initial state. This looks good. This looks good. Okay, so why don't we try something? Why don't we try putting this email field in our document? So I'm not going to put it in the lead capture yet. I just want to test out this email field and even see if it works. And let's go do that now. So main.jsx, and let's go ahead and import that. So var, we're just going to say email field equals require. And since we're in main, we need to go into components.components/email field.jsx. Okay, so there we have that there, and let's put this in here. So email field, that looks good to me. And instead of ingredients, let's just for right now say email. And I'm gonna go to index.html in the public folder here, and let's make sure we've got an email ID right in here. Okay, open up my terminal. Let's go ahead and run npm start. Make sure there's no errors and that it compiles correctly. Come on. All right, 4.2 seconds, way too long. Okay, so let's go into our folder and public and index. And I don't see an email field, so I'm guessing I broke something. Command Alt J to open console. It cannot read property valid of null. Okay, so I did something wrong here. Let's go to our email field. And let's look at, okay, cannot set valid of null. I didn't follow the documentation. Validator.validate. Remember? Let's look at terminal to make sure it's, okay, it did its thing, made its change. Let's go over to our browser again and refresh. Okay, so we've got this error here. Cannot read property value of null. Let's take a look here. React create element. Here it is. This dot state dot value. Okay, so let's. I was playing around here for a second. So let's look at this here. So this dot state dot valid is throwing an error saying it's null. That should not be happening because we are setting a get initial state. Right. Initial state. So, for those of you who maybe are like sometimes like, I really wish he would read from a script and just go from A to Z. Well, had I done that, you would not have seen that a spelling error on get initial state thus renders the initial state null. And so we're like looking over here, why is it null? Well, now you know. If you have problems with your state being null right from runtime, it's very likely that you spelled something wrong or didn't put it there. I just saved that. Let's make sure it did compile. Let's refresh the page. Okay. So what I want to test out now that it's working, is I want to test out that it turns red. Although this doesn't look like Bootstrap's working. We need to put Bootstrap in too, don't we? Because I don't think we put it in. I was going to say, like, it looks pretty ugly to me. So up here, let's go ahead and add Bootstrap in our index.html file. Do you see what I mean about, like, when you run into problems, you solve the problems? Okay, like, there's no, like, I'm going to do this first, this first, this first. Like, nobody does that. It's too much to think about. So you just implement things, and as you run into problems, you fix them. I mean, you have an overall plan and architecture, but I'm just talking about the mechanics of it all. So link rel equals style sheet, and href equals, and we are in the main public directory, so this is going to be css/bootstrap.min.css, and let's do another link, rel equals style sheet, okay, href equals css bootstrap-theme.min.css. Okay, that's looking much better. Let's go ahead and refresh our page. Hey, look at that. It's covering the whole screen, but that's because we don't have other things in place. So, you know, you could easily fix that, you know, if you wanted to, you know. Who cares? We don't care about it. We're going to make it look nice anyway later. You're like, it looked better before. Yeah, well, shut up. Okay, so we're going to start typing, and as we type, it should start turning red until we have a valid email. Okay, so it's definitely not turning red. Let's see if we have any errors here. No errors, which is good. I just did Command-Alt-J to open up the console. So let's look at our code here for our email field. Okay, so what we want to do is make sure we have a logic error. Look at this. So what we're doing here is we're saying, hey, if this is valid, let's set valid to false. But if it's not valid, let's set it to true. We just did this backwards. I meant to put a pound sign here in front. So if it's not valid, let's set it to false. Otherwise, let's set it to true. I just saved that. Let's refresh it. There we go. See how it's red? Okay. So basically, you know, I'll refresh it here. As I start typing, we'll say jon@john.c. Oh, look at that. It's already valid. That's a valid email address. Cool. It's not valid now, but now it is. So we know our package is working too because it turns blue. So if you don't remember what we're doing, okay, what we're doing is on every change, we're calling this onChange function here, which uses our validator to grab the value from the incoming text from the input field to make sure it's valid. If it's valid, let's set it to valid right here. If it's not valid, let's set it to false. And then we base the class that we use with Bootstrap. Okay, we base that class on whether it's valid or not. So it definitely is working. And for the most part, I think this email field is done. So we'll call this video done. And in the next exciting video, we will finish up our lead capture form. And remember to get your free live help, go to devslopes.com and click on chat room. I'm there all the time, as well as a huge community of other students.